The Kentucky Small Business Development Center is a statewide, nationally accredited program that provides no-cost, confidential business coaching and training services. Whether you're just getting started or are ready to expand, we have the tools, resources, and expertise to help you succeed. We're part of a national network, America's SBDC, with over 1,000 centers across the nation. To learn more about how the Kentucky SBDC can serve you, please visit KentuckySBDC.com or email us at info@KentuckySBDC.com. You can also reach us by calling 888-414-7232. Thank you for joining today's webinar. The chat feature is available for you to ask questions and interact with today's speaker. Please take a moment to introduce yourself and where you are watching from today.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Rodney Cool, and I am the Center Director out of London, Kentucky. And we appreciate everyone attending today. And as the video said, we would love for you to put in where you're from, maybe even what company you're with, in the chat feature at the bottom of your page or wherever you have it located at. Would appreciate you putting that in. And for today's webinar, if you have any questions, please type them in to the chat feature, and we'll try to monitor that. Probably, unfortunately, we won't get to every question, but we'll keep a list of that, and we'll circle back around to them and then try to get answers back to you via email. So today we have with us Joshua Stutzman with the U.S. Small Business Administration. He's the Deputy Director here in Kentucky out of the Louisville office. Joshua has over 12 years of federal government service, and in his current role as SBA, he manages the strategic efforts and daily operations of SBA's activities in the counties within the surrounding area and in Louisville metropolitan area. The district office serves all 120 counties in Kentucky. The district's primary role is helping small businesses start, grow, and succeed through counseling and training, guaranteed lending, government contracting. Joshua also works with SBA lenders, resource partners, and small businesses in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, helping to facilitate information, training, and assistance in local and small business communities. So Joshua, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know how busy you are to make this presentation for us, and I'm excited to have you with us because federal contracting and certifications is something that we as SBD coaches get asked all the time about. And being able to have an expert such as you in the process will really help our clients and our customers understand. And not only that, but if you're unable to watch the entire video, we do archive our recordings on KentuckySBDC.com. There's a training tab there, and you just push down to the bottom of that, and it says archived webinars. So if you miss something, you can always go back and watch it. And we always appreciate any comments or feedback you have for us. So Joshua, tell us, what do we need to do to get more money in our pocket through that federal contracting?
Oh, Rodney, well, first of all, let me start off by saying thank you for inviting me to be on today's webinar, and thank you to all of those that are in attendance. One of the things that I just kind of want to outline before we get started today is we're going to do a training on Contracting 101. What that's going to cover is why you want certifications with the federal government and how to get access to some of those contracting dollars Rodney alluded to. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen in the PowerPoint presentation. I am coming to you live from our district office here in Louisville, Kentucky. As you can see from the federal decor in the background, I'm sitting here live in the office. We are available for appointments as people have more questions. And like Rodney said, we always want to utilize our resource partners, such as the SBDC and the PTAC that are out there to answer further questions. But we will make this slideshow available to everybody so you can review it. And one thing I will do before I go to the actual slideshow itself is show you within each section, there are some pretty in-depth notes. As you see, if you want to go back and reference something that I might have touched on, and if you have further questions, in the notes section of each slide, it actually goes even more in depth and references some of the CFR, which stands for Code of Federal Regulations, that governs that particular area. So without further ado, we're going to get into Contracting 101. First, one of the things you want to ask yourself as a business owner, am I ready to do business with the government? What do you sell? I'm going to talk today about a couple ways that you can benchmark and do research to find out if the government does buy any of the goods or services that you are selling or providing. Next question, do you have federal contracting experience, cash, inventory, working capital? It doesn't matter if you say no to this, because we'll actually talk about some ways that you can either partner or be mentored by people or that are successful and have been successful in the past to get you contract ready, or also perform as a subcontractor for a prime, and then you can gain experience that way. So you're then ready later to be a prime contractor on a federal contract. So are you capable? Are you capable of fulfilling a government contract? We'll actually get into what that looks like, and then where to find the contract opportunities. So one of the big things are the certifications that we're going to talk about today, and how that actually gives you an inside track to get federal contract dollars, kind of what Rodney mentioned earlier. So the government is the world's largest, again, I'll stress, world's largest buyer of goods and services, with money up in the billions upon billions of dollars spent every year. There's actually a 23% federal contract dollars that are set aside or intended for small business specifically. So that's how we are going to look at these certifications today. Of that 23%, how do you get your share of the pie? And how do you actually get federal contracts, even without competition in some cases, if you do have the right certifications? So we'll talk about full and open competition. This is where you actually would respond to a solicitation. We'll talk about small business set-asides and the opportunities for sole source contract. That means no competition necessary. You have the proper set-aside certification, and they can actually sole source it directly to you. We'll actually talk about how you briefly market yourself to some of these contracting officers that may have a contract that fits in with what you do. And we'll talk about what that looks like. I actually have some websites already up, and when I get to that point, I'll share my screen so everybody can kind of see what those websites look like and how you can benchmark some of the past dollars spent to businesses kind of like yourself, or maybe have a like certification. So as we talk about targeted set-asides and acquisitions goals, it's over 23% currently, and how that piece of the pie is broken up is 5% are currently earmarked for women-owned small businesses. That is a certification. Small disadvantaged businesses, and to include 8A certified businesses, that is a contracting certification that we'll talk about, and that's at 5%. HUBZone, now that stands for Historically Underutilized Business Zone. That is another type of certification, and they have a 3% piece of that pie where they're actually setting aside. One of the things I will stop to kind of highlight is that's the minimums of the government goals and targets for these areas. I will tell you, in the 12 years that I've been with the federal government, we actually surpass or exceed these goals. In many areas, they're double and triple. And it kind of depends agency to agency. That is as a whole. There are some agencies that are notorious for triple and quadrupling their goal. But as a whole, we always meet and exceed over all government agencies these type of goals. And the service disabled veteran-owned small business goal is at 3%. So when I talked about these goals, I kind of want to hit on one thing Rodney didn't get in my intro. Before I came to the SBA, I worked for the Department of Defense as a contracting specialist and contracting administrator for the DoD and with the Air Force out of MacDill Air Force Base. So I saw firsthand how the government does market research before they even go to advertise. And one of the big things I can say from at least the DoD side is they are actively looking out there for small businesses. We'll actually talk about how you get your business registered and make sure that you upfront have your certifications listed, because sometimes the government, before they ever advertise anything or anybody reaches out and self-markets to them, They're in a database called DSBS, which is the Dynamic Small Business Search. And they're looking for NAICS codes, and there's radio buttons where they can actually look for businesses that have service disabled veterans status or women-owned small business status. And we'll talk more about that as we go through the slides. And Rodney will be viewing the chat. If there's something at any time I go too fast or an acronym that I don't explain the first time, please, put it in the chat, raise your hand, and make sure they know. And then I'll make sure I carve out some time at the end of today's presentation to ensure we answer all the questions that have been posted the best we can within the time limits. So these set-aside contracts that you heard me mention earlier, reserved for small businesses, that's between the 10,000, that's a micro threshold, purchase threshold, up to 250. That's the SAT, the Simplified Acquisition Threshold. Well, someone on the call is probably thinking, well, what about below $10,000? Well, they actually have availability for some small business to do direct purchase card. So some projects where it's mounting TVs up to $2,500 and $3,000, $3,500, they can do a purchase card and they can go through a small business that way as well. And then you say, oh, well, what about some of the bigger contracts that are out there? There are some opportunities for sole source, including one of the certifications we'll talk about today, which is the 8A certification. So there are contracts that are awarded direct sole source to 8A certified businesses for $4 million. So we'll talk about what that looks like as well. And again, don't worry, as we kind of clean over some of the topics very loosely now, we'll go more in depth and drill down on them. So if you have questions later in the presentation, know that some of your questions may be answered as we advance through the slides. All right, so how do you get started? Well, first thing you have to do is, as a business owner, and some of you might have already done this, is obtain a Dun & Bradstreet number, or just simply known as a DUNS number. The great thing is on this slideshow, a lot of my links are interactive, so you can click and actually go to the site, make sure you filled your information out right. Because the next thing you're going to do is register in SAM. Any business that ever wants to do work with the federal government has to have a profile set up in SAM. How you get to it is by clicking on this hot link right here, and it'll take you to the SAM site. And then the next thing you have to do is obtain a commercial and government entity, or called a CAGE code. Again, very simple. You do everything online now, and the link will take you right through the registration to get your CAGE code. That is a unique identifier for your business. And that's how, when you go into contracts, they'll actually list your CAGE code, and your DUNS number will be on there. It's very important you have that information set up before you can start doing work with the federal government. So a couple slides ago, we talked about the different pieces of the pie. As we look at what each certification is, we highlight women-owned small business certification. We formally, or actually fondly call it WOSB. And then we have the EDWOSB, the Economically Disadvantaged Women-Owned Small Business Certification. Then we have the Service Disabled Veteran-Owned Small Business. And then the 8A program. This is a developmental program for socially and economically disadvantaged businesses. And we'll talk in depth about what that program looks like. That is a 9-year program. It's once a lifetime, and the individual actually has to be at least 51% owner has to be the socially and economically disadvantaged individual applying for utilization of that program. You would get a business opportunity specialist or a business development specialist assigned to you for the duration of the program, which they'll help be a springboard of your ideas as you look at how to self-market your business to these government entities and really get access to some of those set-aside contracts and sole source opportunities out there for the 8A program. Then we'll also talk about HUBZone. As you heard me mention earlier, this stands for the Historically Underutilized Business Zone. The great thing about this, if you're not sure the current location you're in for your businesses in the hub zone, SBA last year updated all the maps to include when the hub zone for that area. You actually type in your address and it'll tell you if it's a current hub zone, if it'll be coming out of the hub zone program in a year or two, if that is being redesignated. It is an interactive map, as well as knowing if you are looking at 2 potential sites for your business. You type in the address and I'll tell you if it is currently in a hub zone, which could help you decide where you might want to relocate to if you are moving or expanding your business. Okay, next as we talk about the WOSB, or the Women-Owned Small Business Certification, there is a side standard. You must be a small business. And how we figure that out is through the NAICS code. If you've never heard the acronym NAICS code, it stands for the North American Industry Code for your business. If you don't know what that is for your business, the great thing is one of those sites I'm going to share today is the Census Bureau's website, and that's just census.gov. And you can actually type in keywords. If I know I do construction or roofing, I would type in roofing construction, or if it's general construction, and then the site will actually tell me the NAICS code associated with that business type. For example, general construction is 236220. Why that's so important is when you're looking for opportunities, it's important to know the NAICS code, so you know what's advertised out there, but also what the size standard is. Say, for example, if you type in that NAICS code, and I'll tell everyone how you get to that table, there's a size standard. So if it's, for example, $37 million in annual gross receipts, as long as you're below that, you're still considered a small business. For those that are in manufacturing, your NAICS code actually dictates how big your business can be to actually still be considered a small business. That's your size standard. And we have a table on the SBA.gov website. In the search tab, you just type in size standard table and it'll pop up. You put in your NAICS code and it will tell you if you're manufacturing, some manufacturing is up to 500 employees, but that's all dictated and your revenue is dictated by your NAICS code. That's why it's very important to make sure you have the proper NAICS code that represents what you are doing in your business. All right, so going back to ownership. As I mentioned before, those that are applying for ownership, whether it's the 8A or in this case, we're talking about the WOSB certification, the primary owner has to be 51%. That's the one qualifying. So if I'm the woman owner of a said business and I'm at least 51%, that's how I know that I can push forward with my application. Say if I'm 50% and my partner's 50% and we're both guys, we are not able to apply for this. But if I'm only 49% and my partner, who is a woman, is 51%, then we could look at the other criteria to apply, as well as time in business and who manages the day-to-day operations. Because we're applying for a women-owned certification, the woman actually has to be one of the manager or higher ranking officials in the business doing the daily operations and management of that business to qualify for the certification. Going along to the next piece of women-owned small business, we have the economically disadvantaged piece of a women-owned small business. This is when the personal net worth minus the assets and liabilities is less than $750,000. Your 3-year average income is $350 or less. So if last year I made 200, this year I made 300, and then 3 years ago I made 275. I obviously qualify under that 3-year average income because it's less than $350,000. Fair market value of all assets is $6 million or less. That's how you qualify for the economically disadvantaged portion of the women-owned small business. So just remember, you can be a woman-owned small business and not qualify to be economically disadvantaged, but you can also qualify to have both certifications. So WOSB and EDWOSB eligibility process, again, sam.gov. You're going to want to make sure you're already registered in SAM, and then you can visit the beta.certified.sba.gov. This is the actual site where you actually put in your application as the certify site. SBA certification is required after October 15th of 2020 for all set-asides. So how do you get the most out of your program and your certification? Well, once you get registered, you then qualify for the set-aside or sole source contract awards that I talked about earlier, those pieces of the pie. And then you can also increase prime and subcontracting opportunities. Remember, there are 2 different ways you can perform on a contract. There are subcontracting goals for certain disadvantaged businesses. So even if you don't think you qualify yet or you don't have the capabilities or resources to be a prime contractor, know that those individuals that are getting prime contracts with the federal government still have a requirement to subcontract some of their opportunities to small businesses that have a certification or one of the programs like WOSB, service disabled, veteran-owned small businesses, there are still subcontracting goals that the government does require for certain small disadvantaged businesses. So there's also an opportunity to build capacities and grow by establishing joint ventures and then participating in the Small Mentor Protege program. And what this could mean for you is you could joint venture with someone to work on a contract together, or you could be mentored by someone and then later have that mentor turn into a joint venture partner of you. So you actually get opportunities to learn from someone that's been successful in the past, so you can then be successful on a government contract yourself and not just jump into the water without maybe going along with someone first that has been successful. So there is access to training, management, and technical assistance programs to include the 7J training, because you do qualify for 7J training if you are a WOSB and EDWOSB program participant and you are certified. Once you apply to it, you can then start looking for 7J opportunities. And those are training different things. So if you're in construction, they may do a class on how to process and submit performance-based submittals so you get paid on time. Those type of classes about how to market to the federal government are also provided through 7J, and they're completely free to you. So Rodney, before we move on to the 8A program, I did see there are some Q&A. I'm not able to open those. Are there any questions at this time before we move on to the next certification type?
Yeah, we have one really. If you qualify for multiples, how do you determine which to seek certification for?
So you want to actually become certified in everything that you're eligible for. Now, that person, if they tell me which ones they're eligible for, I can really kind of dive down into it and give an example. But if you're eligible for multiple different types of certifications, say for myself, me personally, I'm a service disabled veteran. If I owned a business and let's say I am also qualified to do one of the other programs, I would also apply to that. There are businesses out there that are service disabled veteran-owned businesses. There are also women-owned businesses that are minority-owned businesses. They check several boxes. And the reason why that is very important, as you saw the different pieces of the pie that I mentioned early on about the government's contracting goals, when they're actually looking and doing marketing efforts to do their assessment of who's available out there, they may be short on their service disabled veteran goal, so they would then reach out to you for possibly performing on that contract. But if they're short on their women-owned small business goal, well, guess what? You also have that certification. So that's why it's important to really leverage these certifications for yourself. If you qualify for several of them, you're just really setting yourself up for more access into federal contracting dollars.
Great. Do have one more.
Sure.
This person has used all of their codes when applying for a woman-owned small business, and they're asking for backup codes to access the application. How do they get more in order to finish?
So there's that. If they're talking about the NAICS codes, there's over 444 total NAICS codes that qualify under the woman-owned small business, like the set-aside portion of the contract. And later in the slideshow, I actually have a link to that, and then they can review if that person is speaking about the NAICS codes. So we'll talk about the codes that are actually applicable on the women-owned small business side that are available for sole source contracting.
Awesome. And great. There is a question about, is there help available for all this? And this is where your Kentucky Small Business Development Center comes in. So if you are needing help with this process, just reach out to the closest Small Business Development Center to you. You can also get that at the KentuckySBDC.com website.
Yeah, and that's actually a perfect segue, and I'm going to do the shameless plug and say that's why we do so much work with the SBDC and our resource partners, because when we put on these webinars, it's really to highlight what's out there. But as you have questions, work with your counselor, work with your SBDC personnel to really ask those questions. And you know what? That's where you create that dialogue or that conversation, and more information will come out that you may not have known that was available through having those conversations with your SBDC counselor.
All right, we're ready to move on.
All right, perfect. So another program near and dear to my heart is 8A Business Development Program. I actually spent 3 years in the South Florida office as the supervisory business opportunity specialist. I will tell you personally, in any given year, our program in Florida was doing over 500 million in 8A sole source contracts alone. And that's just one district. So to kind of put that into perspective, 500 million in set aside contracts, that doesn't include the type of contracts that are competed only amongst 8As, because there is an 8A competitive set aside where they say the Department of Defense or DLA or another 3-letter agency is looking to do a contract, but it's tens of millions of dollars. Well, based on the program and the Code of Federal Regulations, they can still put it into the program, but then they make it competitive only to other 8As. Why I'm kind of like telling everyone about this up front is how exciting is that you can get contracts. NASA has done $35 million contracts where my only competition is other 8A contractors. That's like limiting your playing field, which is awesome. I'd rather compete with 100 people than 10,000 people. And that's kind of how I put that in perspective. And the 8A program does allow you to get sole source set aside contracts. Say if there's a $4 million contract, they may never even advertise it. I've done some self-marketing as an 8A company, and then they award it to me directly without ever putting out a solicitation. So as I kind of digress, talking about what the program is, not just what the benefits are. So let's talk about what it is. It's a 9-year program available once per lifetime, and it has 4 years of a developmental stage and then 5 years as a transitional stage of the program, where you're actually working with your business development specialist or business opportunity specialist to find out what contracts are available and really help get you revenue streams that you didn't have before, access to contracts and past performance that you didn't have before, which will truly allow your business to not only grow, but eventually when you're in that transition time frame of the 9-year program, where you're kind of mentoring or maybe working with those new small businesses where you once were at the very beginning of the 9-year program yourself. So you're going to build capacity and grow through getting these contracts. And then what we want to talk about is what are the requirements. So you still have to be considered a small business. That goes back to kind of what we talked about earlier is, hey, if I'm manufacturing, am I below the number of employees? Or if I have a NAICS code, are my NAICS codes that I'm operating in or applying to the program with considering me a small? Obviously, if I'm doing $5 million a year and the NAICS code that I operate under has a limitation or a threshold up to $37 million per year, or 37.5 in some cases, I'm definitely considered small. M is the disadvantaged owner, the person that is applying under the economic and social disadvantage. Are they at least 51% owner? That is important. And do they manage and control the day-to-day operations? That's important. One of the things I do want to kind of highlight is it does have to be a full-time business. You can't work for, say, I can't work for the SBA 40 hours a week and then have a business that I try to get into a program, or I can't work for, you know, the power company and then say that I have a small business that I do on the side. It has to be a full-time engagement that you are using to apply for this. So it can't be a side business. It has to be your primary source of income. Now, with that said, can you do your small business and then have other things that you maybe contract on the side? Yeah, that's perfectly fine, but it has to be your full-time obligation of time for work has to be in that business to be considered eligible for the 8A program. Other eligibility requirements, good character. So we've gotten questions a lot is, hey, if I ever got a DUI or a speeding ticket, am I still eligible? Yes, absolutely can still be eligible. Where people really, really mess themselves up is where you make false statements on your application and then they later find out that you had a DUI or something that you did not admit to. That's where it can be a problem. They look at length of time, like how far in the past something was and how great the offense was. So there are people that have, in the past had some minor infractions that were able to get into the program, but they, again, look at how honest you are about it on the application and how serious the offense might have been. And then we're also going to talk about ineligibility criteria. So during the program, some of the benefits, you heard me mention BOS and BDS. That's the Business Opportunity Specialist and the Business Development Specialist. They are there with you to help you really, really figure out where you want to go. I always tell people, sometimes to the outside eye, the government can be a very confusing place, but think of the assistance the SBA provides you as like your own personal tour guide. They're going to help you understand the roadmap and how to really navigate not only the program, but the different sites, the acronyms, and understand how you can benefit from them. There is a proven return on investment in these programs. We've actually had a couple firms that I have known of personally that had to graduate early because they were no longer a small business, right? That's a terrible problem to have, as you grow too big and you can't be considered a small business, right? That's how we know it's a proven return on investment. But remember, when you come into a program like this, they just don't automatically pick up the phone and start calling you and offering you contracts. There are things that you have to do to make this happen and leverage your certification. And that's where the SBA assistance comes in. They teach you and talk to you about how to self-market yourself, who you should be talking to get some of these sole source and set aside contracts. And that's why you can be successful. If you're a go-getter and you want to go out there and figure out how to market yourself to the federal government, that's how you get the contracts. That's part of your effective strategy in becoming successful and having that high return on your investment of time. The program's for free to enter what you would be putting in. And I had a coworker that once used this kind of analogy to sum up the program. The 8A program is like a license to hunt. Just because you have a hunting license, the deer is not going to jump in your truck and follow you home. You actually have to go out there and look for the deer. And what is going on here with the 8A program is if you get that 8A certification, it gives you that free rein to go out there and hunt for contracts, hunt for opportunities, and really make it your strategy of how you want to see your business grow. Another thing is mentor-protege agreements. You can actually go into a mentor-protege. Although we do not link you up with a mentor, or if you're in the transition stage and you're looking for someone to be your protege, so you can still possibly have like a transition plan as you exit the 8A, but you still want to kind of maybe do some work with someone that has access to those 8A set-aside contracts. We teach you of how you can find a mentor or how you can find a protege, but we don't assign them. And then joint ventures. Sometimes people actually end up doing joint ventures with someone that was previously their mentor. And sometimes people do joint ventures with someone that they may have met at a conference or a marketing event. So let's talk about the 8A application process. You see a reoccurring theme here. Everybody needs a DUNS number. Doesn't matter what certification you're going for, you need a DUNS number, and you have to identify what NAICS code your business is operating in. Now, fear not, some businesses may have 20 or 30 NAICS codes. That's perfectly natural and normal. But when you're going into the 8A program, you also need to really identify which of those NAICS codes you may be operating under is the primary revenue generating stream of your business. So in construction, for example, there's different NAICS codes for plumbing, roofing, concrete. You may do all those things, but what is your number one generator as far as business? What NAICS code? The reason you really have to figure that one out before you come into the 8A program is because your primary NAICS code, your main NAICS code, is what identifies whether you stay small and what your threshold on your, say, revenue stream would be. Say, for example, there are some, in my example about construction, there are some construction NAICS codes that have a limitation up to 15 million and some that have a revenue limitation up to $37.5 million, and they're still considered small businesses. Again, still have to register with SAM, and you're going to go to that same certified.sba.gov website to do everything on certification. Now, one of the things I will say, I don't know you can still see me on camera. I just see the presentation mode. But it used to be that you'd have stacks and stacks of different files as you would come through and look at 8A applicants. Well, now everything's digitally online. Once you upload it once, it is on the cloud, and you don't have to keep uploading that same document and creating copies of it to submit. So everything's been streamlined, and it is actually a lot faster. You can actually look and make sure you go through the checklist. One thing I do want to harken back to is completeness of any application that you put in the system. Please make a self checklist or look on our website. We have a lot of the checklists to make sure you've submitted everything. That way, anybody that's reviewing your application doesn't add more time to your application certification processing time by coming back to you to ask for a document or a section you forgot to fill out. So one of the resources, you have access to resources on the knowledge base. And again, please contact certified.sba.gov. They have assistance available if you run into any problems on the site as well. And next, we're going to talk about how to get the most out of your 8A certification. Already at the beginning of this presentation, everybody heard me stress the importance of a lot of these goals the federal government's trying to reach. Well, once you come into the 8A program, you qualify for set aside and/or sole source contract awards. This helps agencies achieve success because in some cases, they cut their award time in half. They don't have to actually advertise it. That's why it's so important to make sure your profiles are complete when you actually go to register with SAM, to make sure you have your NAICS code, you have all your contact information, because there's a site, as I mentioned earlier, the Dynamic Small Business Search site, that a lot of federal entities will go in, they'll throw in a NAICS code, and they'll look for like, hey, 8A, there's actually a radio button where they can look for all certified 8A companies under certain NAICS code, and they may reach out to us, your SBA office, or to you directly as the business, because they are looking to direct award that. As you can see, sole source contracts values up to $7.5 million for manufacturing and up to $4.5 million for all others. That's like services, construction, marketing, some training classes. So if you offer those type of services, know that that sole source contract can be set aside up to $4.5 million. You also heard me mention earlier that they can do what's called a competitive 8A, where they actually set aside a contract that may be $30 million, and they can actually set it into the 8A program, which means only other 8As can compete for that contract. That was my example is, hey, I'd rather compete with 100 people than 100,000 people. So that's the difference on what 8A certification actually brings to the table for you. There's a lot of opportunities for direct award and also for limited competition. Obviously, the program is going to give you a great opportunity to build capacity, because anytime you can get a contract without competing and help quickly increase your revenue stream, hey, you're going to be able to build more capacity as you grow as a business owner. And then next, access to management and technical assistance. That includes the 7J training you heard me mention earlier. That's free training. Guaranteed loans and bonding assistance. We have like surety bonding, especially if you're in construction and you need assistance getting bonding. That is available. And one of the other things that those of you that will go back and look at this slide, please take a mental note, slide 16. There's something called surplus property. When you come into the 8A program, and also those of you that will be registering as service disabled veteran-owned small businesses, please, please, please take advantage of surplus property. Through GSA, there are things available to you through surplus property through GSA and some of the state websites, that whether it's things that have been surplus from the government, whether it's old computers, desks, if you're looking to furnish an office. I've had some companies where for their business, they needed to pull a trailer. Well, guess what? Guess what pulls a trailer? Humvees. Yes, those are in there. I've had businesses find jets, helicopters. The only criteria is it has to be mentioned in your business plan of how you would use that piece of equipment. I just can't go if I'm a, say, a drainage company and say I need a jet. Well, how does that really relate to my business? As long as you say, oh, hey, you know, we have trailers. Well, yeah, trailers need to be pulled. So in your business plan, it shows that you need trucks that are, you know, powerful enough to pull trailers. That's a Humvee. Same kind of thing as if you're a business and you will be doing training, you're going to need computers, printers, desks. Well, guess what? Those type of items, now it is a rotating stock, so you never know month to month what may be available in there, but you might be surprised some of the great opportunities for sometimes severely discounted and free merchandise that is available through the surplus property program. And again, if you are a certified 8A company, you're eligible for that. As long as, like I said, in your business plan, it states that you need that type of equipment. Same thing, service disabled veteran-owned businesses, please take advantage of surplus property. It is out there, and it is a cool program that you now have access to once you get these certifications. All right, Rodney, before I move on to service disabled veteran-owned small business program, any questions up to here? I know it was rapid fire on some of those things with the 8A. Anything that we want to kind of maybe go back to or highlight?
Yeah, if you have already been 8A certified and graduated with one business, can you reapply under an entirely different entity doing something totally different?
You cannot. It's under the person. So the 51% owner. So if I used to be Joshua Stutzman of ABC Roofing and I sold that business, and now I want to try to apply Joshua Stutzman as, you know, JR's discounted computers, I cannot apply because I was the 51% owner of another 8A company at some point in time. So it goes back to the ownership of the individual for the business who's applying to be eligible.
Do you include more than one NAICS code when registering for Duns and Sams?
Yes, you want to. So one of the things that I highlighted before is in the 8A program, make sure you specify your primary NAICS code. Same thing in SAM. You want to specify what is your primary, but definitely when you're building your SAM's profile and when you're applying your DUNS number, you may not know of all the NAICS codes just yet, but the ones you do know, make sure that you specifically report, hey, this is my primary NAICS code, and these are a couple of the other NAICS codes that we'll be operating under. All the information you have relevant at the time, please include it. That makes it a lot easier to discern. If they have questions when you're applying under those programs, they'll definitely come back to you. But you do want to list out all the ones that you know of at the time that you'll be operating under.
We did have a couple of questions asking what is sole source contracts and a set aside reward.
Okay, yeah, so sole source, when we're talking about, I would get that contract direct. As you heard me mention, that site DSBS, the Dynamic Small Business Search site. So say there is a DOD, a Department of Defense individual looking to award a contract. It's $2 million, and they know that it's for, you know, NAICS code 236220. So they go on the site, they put in their NAICS code, and they hit the radio button to say, hey, I'm only looking for 8A companies in this NAICS code. Well, they see Joshua Stutzman's construction business in there, and you know they reach out to the SBA to make sure we're still eligible and, you know, in good standings in that program. And then guess what? They didn't call or talk to anybody else. They didn't advertise it. That sole source award is then given to Joshua Stutzman's construction company without competition. That's what a sole source is. Now those set asides are those different pieces of the pie that I mentioned, your set aside programs where they set aside a certain percentage of their annual acquisition strategy for a service disabled veteran-owned business, for a HUBZone business. They're setting aside a overall percentage of their total annual spend for those type of certification areas. The person that asked that question, if that explanation answered what you're looking for, or you have a follow-on question, please let me know. But that's the difference of what a set aside and what a sole source contract would look like.
We're ready to move on.
All right, sounds good. All right, so going to service disabled veteran-owned small business. So as a veteran, I'd like to thank all on this call that are veterans for your service, but please please leverage your past service, especially if you've been disabled or have a rating in the line of duty. You want to make sure that you take advantage of what's available to you out there as far as being a service disabled veteran-owned small business owner. So this is another program where you can build capacity and grow, because there are opportunities that are specifically set aside for these veteran-owned businesses. So you can also establish joint ventures. Obviously, as many of you would guess, the VA is a huge proponent of this actual certification, and they give a very large portion. Now, say even if the goal was only 3 or 5%, well, guess what? The VA gives a lot more than their 3 or 5% goal to service disabled veteran-owned businesses. So that's why it's always good to know what's out there. And harkening back to that question someone asked earlier, is what is a set aside? Well, those set aside are opportunities, or where they're setting aside for these certain programs. That's why when someone else asks, hey, if I qualify for certain multiple things, should I pick them? Absolutely. Heck yes, please do that. There are no restrictions on how many you can apply for. The only restriction is in the case of the 8A, where you only get that once a lifetime. So you do want to be very strategic about when you apply for your 8A if you are eligible. You can always get with one of your SBDC counselors or our business development specialist here at the SBA, Pam Pearson, if you want to talk to make sure that you're truly ready to come into the program now, because it is only 9 years, and that 8A program does go by fast, and you only get it once. A lot of these other programs, hey, you're a service disabled veteran-owned small business, unless for some reason something happened and you lost your status, that one doesn't go away. It's not like the 8A program you apply to it once. Hey, you're a service disabled veteran and you have another business, that business is a service disabled veteran-owned small business as well. All right, so is the certification appropriate for you? As you see a theme, anytime you're applying for any of these certifications, the person that is qualifying for it has to be 51% ownership or greater. And then you have to be the one that manages the daily operations, have a proper NAICS code, and then you have to be the highest officer position within the company. All right, still getting the most out of this program. It enables firms to qualify for set-aside contracts, or in this case, also sole source. That was like my example where they can actually directly award it to me as the business. So that's the sole source contract awards, and it helps agencies to meet their service disabled veteran-owned small business goals. If you kind of close your eyes, remember the slide I had with all the pie chart with the different slivers. That's one of the slivers in there of that pie, is that service disadvantaged veteran-owned small business goal. All right, and then obviously it's going to facilitate leveraging this program, and your certification is going to facilitate the developmental opportunities for you as a business, and also there's more growth potential by establishing joint ventures and mentor protege agreements as well. More prime and subcontracting opportunities. Please use fedbiz.va.gov. Next year, SBA will be doing the applications for these, but one of the things I want to kind of really highlight again is where it says more prime and subcontracting opportunities. So remember, they also have subcontracting goals. So even if you're not ready and you to perform as a prime, and you're a service disabled veteran-owned small business, you can still look for opportunities out there for subcontracting. We actually have a site off the SBA.gov site. If you type in sub.net under our search, there are companies that are actively looking for subcontractors with certain certifications, such as SDVOSB, so they can meet their subcontracting goals that are required of them by the federal government. So it's always a great opportunity to really remember that you don't always have to be the prime to get access to some of those federal government contracting dollars. All right, so let's talk about HUBZone. Rodney, do we need to pause at any time talking about veterans before we move on to HUBZone?
No, nothing for that. And just want to let people know if we do run a little bit long, certainly understand if you need to drop off. Don't forget the webinar is recorded and you can find it at KentuckySBDC.com. So just continue on,
Okay,
Joshua.
yeah. So I see we have about 10 minutes left. So what I'll do is I'm going to highlight some of the HUBZone stuff. I'm going to use some more of the remaining time for questions, because HUBZone is one of those things that if you are qualifying for HUBZone, you're going to have a lot more questions. So I'm going to make myself available. And again, Rodney and his team and the SBDC are a great resource for this. Same thing, 51% ownership, and you do have to be a U.S. citizen, just like you do to be in the 8A program as well. Your business has to be in a HUBZone, and 35% of your employees have to live in a HUBZone. Notice I said a HUBZone. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same HUBZone where their business, in case they're commuting. The reason why is they really want to help get dollars and revenue back into these historically underutilized business zones. Same thing about size standard, you still have to be considered small. This slide 22, is really going to tell you all the links of how you can actually look at the HUBZone website, view your location. That's that interactive map I told you about. So please, if you are in this arena and you're looking about HUBZone, use these hot links. I did give Rodney a copy of the presentation, so anybody that wants it, he'll make sure you get a copy. So as we talk about assistance, obviously SBA, we talked about business opportunity specialists, business development specialists. We also have PCRs, which are the procurement center reps. You can actually find the directory. That is a great resource the SBA offers. So you can actually go and find out who's available in your area. So one of the things I'm going to do, as you can see, this is the last slide. It has a lot of great links that I would encourage you to use in your spare time, and then come up with some questions and get back with your SBDC counselor. But really go on to some of these websites and see what's up there, including USA Spending talks about stuff out there available and what they're forecasting for the government to spend and what NAICS codes, as well as the subcontracting directory. I mentioned about subcontracting is a huge area that you can also get dollars generated from federal dollars. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm just going to pop over to my browser real quick. So bear with me. Don't worry, I'll still leave enough time for a few questions. So you heard me mention before the SBS, just so everyone sees, this is what this website looks like. This is public access. So federal agencies use this. You as a small business can use this to even benchmark other businesses of their capabilities narrative. As you can see, that's why it's so important to make sure when you register in SAM, you have all your certifications, because the government may come in here when they're looking to do a contract and then put a certain state or even nationwide, and then click some of these radio buttons to find out active certifications in certain areas. That's going to help them really meet their small business contracting goals. Another thing that you heard me mention is FPDS, Federal Procurement Data System. This is a site that you can use to see all past awarded contracts other than the top secret ones. If you want to benchmark the top 10 agencies that are actually purchasing your good or service. So in this case, I put in 236220 for construction. As you see, Department of Defense is 578,000 contracts in that NAICS code alone. Then you can look, Department of the Army has 328,000 of them by themselves. Everything is linked, so you can actually look at the award, who got it. It tells you how much it's for. So this is a great site to use for benchmarking techniques. One other site I mentioned through our presentation today was the Census Bureau. If you need to look up your NAICS code, you don't know it, just put in a keyword and it'll spit out a list of NAICS codes for you. And then SAM, everyone knows that they need to register in SAM to be eligible for federal contracts. And one last thing before we get to a couple questions, hopefully, is that PCR, the Procurement Center representative, these are individuals that actually work with the government and have covered activities where they work with certain of those agencies. You saw that other site I mentioned. It shows you how certain agencies like the Army purchase a large number. Okay. Well, I need to call Douglas Gerard here and find out who his Army contact is in this area because, you know, I want access to these Army contracts. And so I'm going to really tell him, hey, these are my NAICS codes. Here's a copy of my capability statement. And can you link me up with your point of contact over there at Fort Rucker? You know, I really think that, you know, I could do some work for him. And you just really market yourself and highlight what you're available to do and any of the certifications you have, because this time of year, government's in full spend mode. We are trying to spend end of year money before the close of the books, September 30th. So really know how to leverage those certifications. And we can always do a follow-on training another day of how to market to the federal government. But in conclusion, I just want to say these are some of the sites. That's how you leverage them and use them. And without further ado, Rodney, any questions we want to highlight? I know we got about 5 minutes left. Anything that came up in the hot in the chat?
Yeah, Joshua, one being, and this was asked a couple of times, to apply and receive that 8A certification, do you already have to have one of the other business certifications, like a women-owned business?
No, absolutely not. You don't have to, there's no prerequisite. So if you go to SBA.gov or even that slide where I highlighted it in the notes section, it lists everything that you do need to have to include the registration, SAM, proper NAICS code set up, but you don't have to have any other type of certification already programmed in there. You don't have to be a veteran. You don't have to be a woman-owned small business. You just have to meet the other qualifications where you're socially and economically disadvantaged.
Awesome. Maybe one other, just as a clarification. And I know the change was made earlier this year. So do you still have to have the DUNS number and the unique entity identity or ID number, or do you just do one or the other?
So the great news is when you go to certify, it actually tells you everything and it gives you a checklist. So on our website, the great thing is the checklist is right there and it says, please register. You're hot linked. It shows you where to go to register your business and helps you make sure that you have that entity. So if you've already registered for a DUNS number, when you go to apply again, it'll say duplicate entry. There's a business already matching this DUNS number.
Awesome. All right. Great clarification for that one. Okay. We have any other, let me see if something else has popped in here. Okay, we've already asked those, and it looks like we've answered almost all of the questions. And two, just like Joshua said, I can't stress enough. I know there was a lot of information here, and so to review the recording, you can go to KentuckySBDC.com, go to webinars, and hit archive. Also, as Joshua said, we do have this presentation sent to us. And so sometime probably during today or tomorrow, we will email you those presentations. That way you can see his notes and be able to get more in-depth and detailed information as well. And as always, you need assistance with any of this, and we may not be the entity that helps you fulfill what you need to have done, because we do have a lot of resource partners that we use. But do reach out to the Kentucky Small Business Development Center at the center that's close to you. And I know, looking at where some of the people were coming from, we do have several that are out of state, and every state does have an SBDC. So if you're not in Kentucky, reach out to your local SBDC where you're at. If we need to help you, we'll do it anyway. Kentuckians are good like that. We just like to help. So, all right. I see nothing else in our chat or in the questions. And oh, wait a minute. Yeah, we did.
One squeaky in at the buzzer.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, hit me.
So we get asked this all the time, Joshua, and I actually have it wrote down and forgot to ask it myself. We get asked all the time, are we better off to do women-owned or veteran-owned business certifications? But I think your presentation says that you can have multiple certifications. Do I read that right?
No, you're exactly right. And you'll actually, so one of the things I want to highlight, I talked about benchmarking in DSBS. You'll actually see some businesses where they have several certifications that they've registered in SAM, and they come up with multiple certifications. And there's no limit on that. So if I'm a veteran, but if I was also a woman, I could be a woman owned business and a veteran-owned business and a service-disabled veteran-owned business, small business as well. And then if I get the 8A certification, I can also have that. That's the only one that's one for lifetime though, is the 8A. So always make sure you work with your counselor to make sure you're getting that at the right time for your business. And the reason I say getting that at the right time, some people get it too soon where their business, it doesn't have all the resources yet. So always talk with someone before you pull the trigger on that one.
Awesome. That's great advice for new startups, I think, because we get asked that too. A lot of times as a startup, you may just not have the resources available, but awesome.
Right.
And thanks for answering that question, because that's going to help. I know all of our coaches 1,000%, because we get asked it practically every day. And it's good to know that you can choose multiple certifications and not just one or the other. So.
Yeah. So, hey, if you're a veteran, you can also be like a minority-owned small business. I mean, there's no rule with that. So if you've earned it and the availability and you have the eligibility to have multiple of those certifications, please check them in there. Because like I said earlier in my presentation, the government is trying to fulfill their goals. And you may not fill the veteran goal, but you also have a women goal and they're short on that. And guess what? You're now eligible for this one.
Yeah. Joshua, awesome, man. I tell you what, I have certainly enjoyed this presentation. I have got a book of notes here. I mean, just for myself. So
well, and you have my direct phone number. So
yeah,
those of you that reach out to you, if there's anything that we need to do on a follow-up training, we'll make that happen, Rodney.
Right. Great. Certainly appreciate it. Well, everyone, we've bumped over our hour just a little bit. Certainly appreciate you still hanging with us. And Joshua, we thank you, and we certainly thank SBA and especially our Kentucky District Office for what you do for small businesses in the state of Kentucky and you know, advocating for us, and certainly appreciate all the help you give us.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for your time today, and look forward to the next one. Bye now.
Yep. Thank you all.
Thank you for joining today's webinar. At the Kentucky SBDC, we know small businesses are the heart of our economy. That's why our goal is to help business owners start, grow, and succeed in Kentucky. Find out more about how our no-cost business coaching, training, and resources can help your business. Visit us at KentuckySBDC.com.